Good morning or afternoon or evening, everyone, and welcome to this session called Global Rangeland Atlas, showing the importance of a neglected ecosystem. My name is Bora Masumbuko. I'm a senior program officer at the International Union for Conservation of Nature. I work with the Global Drylands program, which is part of the Global Ecosystem Management Program, and I will be the moderator of this session. This session will focus on the Global Rangeland Atlas. The Atlas is the first one of its kind, and it has been developed to document and raise awareness on the importance and values of rangelands and their different ecosystems. The atlas contains 16 maps showing the rangeland ecosystem and the different aspects, and each map is accompanied by a story. So the atlas was officially launched last week, and later in this session, the atlas will be presented in a bit more detail with some maps and case studies. Our agenda for this session will include a presentation on knowledge gaps about sustainability, pastoralism in the rangelands. We'll have a slider request, we'll have a film on rangelands, and finally the presentation of some maps and some case studies of the atlas. Before I hand over to the first speaker, I would like to give you some technical instructions. If you have questions, you can please add your questions in the chat box. We'll monitor the questions and we'll have a question and answer session later in this session. And to all the speakers, I would like to politely remind you to please keep the times and be as focused as possible, so that we can hear from the other speakers and have enough time for as well, the rest of the meeting. I will now hand over to our first speaker. So our first speaker is Mr. Abdelkader Ben Sada. He's a Program Management Officer at UNEP. Abdelkader manages landscape approaches and drylands activities, as well as the implementation of the resolution of United Nations Environment Assembly on sustainable pastoralism and soil pollution. Mr. Abdelkader Ben Sada, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bora. Thank you, and good morning to everybody, all our participants, or our followers. Thank you very much. So I will go through my presentation about the knowledge gap about sustainability in pastoral and rangeland. Next, please. As all you know, pastoralism is practiced by millions of people worldwide and represents an intimate relationship between people, animals that they care for, and the landscape. So pastoralism is increasingly recognized as one of the most sustainable production systems on the planet and plays a major role in safeguarding the ecosystem services, biodiversity in rangeland, but also offering healthy good services, knowledge, and heritage that benefits humans beyond the herding community. Next, please. During the United Nations Environmental Assembly in its third session, more than 195 countries representatives attended this assembly in Nairobi and adopted the resolution L24 towards sustainable rangeland and pastoralism, and called for a gap analysis on environmental and social economic information and provision of technical support for promoting pastoralism and rangeland. Next, please. So during that assembly, the adoption of the resolution is a recognition of the role and the importance of pastoral and rangeland. And within the resolution, they said, we need more information about rangeland. What we have, we don't know what we have and what we don't have. So that's why the countries, or let's say the UNEA, ask for this gap analysis that can help to to inform about pastoralism and rangeland in order that they can reposition in the right position that is deserved globally. So this gap analysis with UNEP carried out with partners, including David Arundel with technical support, and we went through, has been conducted in 2 mandate areas. Online, publicly available information published since 2000, which included 13 global environmental assessment, more than 100 regional and national database, and more than 71 million of academic and research peer review. But also through technical support information and through the questionnaires. Next, please. What it came out that none of the 13 global environmental assessment reviews disaggregate their information on pastoralism or rangelands. And only 1/3 of the 100 database that we reviewed, all the partners who work on this, have some information about pastoralism and rangeland. Only 2/3 has some information which can be really a little bit used. Next, please. And only 0.1% of the over 71 million academic publication and research mentioned rangeland or pastoralism. So as you see, despite the existing of millennium of pastoralism and rangeland, the role that they play, little is known about pastoralism societies and the interlinkages between their practices and the rangeland on which they depend. So therefore, pastoralism and rangeland tend to be under-recognized and undervalued. Next, please. And the same when we look to the population worldwide of pastoralism, which really vary from few millions to more than 500 million people. That's the information we can find over all this 71 million publication and more than all the information, more than 100 global database and 200 of regional database and so on. The same for the rangeland that they cover, the area covered by the rangeland in the world surface, which is really very, very varied from different publications and information available. So starting from 10 to 80% to 80%. So that we see that the need for an urgent development of global consensus on this information about the rangeland and pastoralism in terms of including the definition, but also the surface, how many people, where they are. This is really not very clear, not very uniform in all those studies that has been carried out. Next, please. Next, please. So that's why, so do the widespread gaps in understanding pastoralism and rangeland. There are many questions that currently cannot be answered with confidence concerning who pastoralists are, where their natural rangeland are located, how land use policy is affecting their land, what effect climate change is having on their land and lifestyles, and how the international community can best support and promote sustainable rangeland and pastoralism livelihood. And that's why sometimes inadequate information about pastoralism and rangeland can lead to changes being implemented where they are not needed, or opposite to practices that were being neglected or destroyed. So that's why without further knowledge on pastoralism and rangeland, it is not possible to judge or to know the impact of the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, on the pastoral lifestyles and their ecosystems. So it's very important that we need to collect all this information and filling these gaps identified in this study, which will be only possible through a comprehensive study, but also financially should be feasible. And the information should come from different sources that they are working on pastoralism and rangeland. But the most important should include pastoralists themselves. So we come up with a few recommendations, such as conducting intergovernmental integrated global assessment help us to collect more information about rangeland and pastoralism, but also enhance the availability of the quality of the existing information. It's not really very consistent, and sometimes it's not there, and trying to develop like a national or international information system to enhance the availability and the quality of the existing information on pastoralism and rangeland. And also here important to include the pastoralist knowledge to understand the specific and dynamic between pastoralist and rangeland. Next, please. But also it's important to develop suitable methodology to assess the extent of which the technical support will be provided to pastoralists based on identified needs and interests. So it's important that all partners, all that we are working on, harmonize methodology with partners and on pastoralism and rangeland, and also engage the pastoralists and pastoralists and civil society working on pastoralism and organization on an assessment to ensure the appropriate inclusion, integration of local and indigenous knowledge. Next, please. Yeah, this is a summary. Next, please. Which we would like to share with you. And this is really justify the need for Atlas, which respond also to United Nations Assembly that ask for more information for the gap analysis, for more information about pastoralism and rangeland. Those information will be helpful for decision makers to position the rangeland and pastoralism in the right position that they deserve in more food security, climate change agenda, restoration agenda. So this is a good reason why, also good reason why the Atlas has been developed. Over to you, Borai. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abdelkader, for this introductory presentation. It clearly shows that there are still gaps in knowledge on rangelands and pastoralism, and this is one of the reasons why the rangelands are still neglected. So we indeed need to fill in these gaps and improve access to knowledge, information, and best practices, including best practices from pastoralists. So now we'll have a slide of questions. So Slido is an application that will actually have our digital support, Mr. Varno, will display some questions. So there will be 3 questions that will be displayed on the screen. And you will have 30 seconds to respond to each question. And then at the end of all the 3 questions, we'll provide the answers to each question. So I will give the floor now to Mr. Werner. So if you can display the different questions. There we are. So you have 30 seconds per question. First question is, what percentage of the world's terrestrial area can be classified as rangelands? So here are some of the responses already. Now, second question, what percentage of rangelands is drylands? So we look forward to see your responses. And finally, the third question is how many types of grasslands are found in rangelands? We provide the responses to all these questions. Oh, and there's a fourth question, what percentage of rangelands in under official protected area status? Okay, so now can we display the responses to the different questions? Okay, for the first question, so what percentage of the world's terrestrial area can be classified as rangelands? The response here is 54%, and we have 80% of the participants who got it right. The second question, what percentage of rangelands is drylands? The correct answer here is 78%. Can we have the response to the second question? Yeah, that's 78% here. That's the correct answer to this question. And 25% of participants got it right. On the third question, how many types of grasslands are found in rangelands? So here the correct answer is 42 types. So a bit less, participants here got the right response. So there are 42 types of grasslands that are found in rangelands. And on the last question, what percentage of rangelands is under official protected area status? So here the correct answer is 12%. So these are the correct answers. So we have 8% of participants who got it right. So thank you very much for answering these different questions. When we'll be presenting the atlas in details, you will understand better, why the responses to these questions, especially the percentage of protected areas, the percentage of also key biodiversity areas that are in rangelands. So this will be described in detail during the presentation of the Rangeland Atlas. So now we're going to show you a short video. It's only a 2-minute video. The film was produced by the filmmaker Patrick Augenstein with the support of WORCAT, which is a World Overview of Conservation Approaches and Technologies, as a contribution to the Rangeland Initiative. And the Rangeland Initiative is a coalition of partners that is promoting rangelands globally. So if we can. Thank you very much. And after this nice video, we're now going to have the Atlas presentation. Atlas is a selection of maps and case studies by Fiona Flinton from the International Livestock Research Institute. Fiona will introduce the idea and content of the Rangelands Atlas. She specializes in natural resource management and land governance and tenure, participatory land use planning and pastoralism, among others. And she has worked with the team on the Atlas maps. So over to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Bora. Great. Good morning, everybody. Lovely to be back at the Global Landscapes Forum. I think you've got an exciting program ahead, and it's great to be able to kick off with this session here. So yeah, first slide, please. So why an atlas on rangelands? Well, as you heard from Abdul Qadir, there are some big data gaps in terms of maps and data figures on rangelands. So we decided that by producing maps, by collating data sets that already exist, this would be a way of starting to fill those gaps. Please show the rest of the bullet slide, the bullet points. Thank you. Secondly, then we felt, well, if we started to bring this data together, then we will be able to use these to raise awareness at a global scale on the different values of rangelands, the environment, the economic, the social value of rangelands, as well as their different ecosystems. If we were able to bring in data sets related to global, to changes happening in rangelands that were being monitored at a global level, then we will be able to engage in those discussions on this and be able to raise the profile of rangelands compared to other ecosystems that get a lot more attention, such as forests. Processes like global, land degradation, neutrality, climate change trends, etc. We also wanted to see if we could, through the Atlas, bring up local voices from the ground to contribute to these discussions. Though the Atlas very much focuses on big data, big global figures, we felt it was important to try and provide a space for local voices to come through as well. I think there's one more bullet point there. Is that correct? Thank you. And then finally, what we have seen over the last couple of years is a growing collaboration on rangelands. And we felt that this atlas could help strengthen that collaboration. Currently, I mean, you've seen the partners that are involved here, but we hope that other global partners will come on board, and together we can really raise the profile of rangelands and draw attention to them. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So how was the Atlas produced? So basically, it was very simple, really. First of all, we produced a base map of rangelands. We used the WWF categorization of global biomes to do that. There are 14 major global biomes that WWF has identified, and on consideration and looking at the descriptions of those biomes, we agreed as a technical working group that 7 of those fulfilled the classification of rangelands that we were using. We have the classification at the beginning of the Atlas. Within these biomes, there are several hundred eco-regions. We didn't go as far down as looking at those ecoregions in detail, but what we will do in future, and what has been suggested to us to help provide some detail on the mapping and potentially include some of the areas that have been missed, or exclude some of the ones that we've included, which might not exactly fulfill the full categorization of rangelands. It would be an advantage to go to that. So this map, this spatial mapping of the rangelands, was combined with other global data sets. So for example, the global data set on protected areas. So then together we could bring those two data sets together to produce a mapping of that data for rangelands. So could I have the next slide, please? So this is an example of the base map. And here you can see the different rangeland types. You can't very easily see this on the screen here, but please do go to the Atlas website and you will be able to see it there. The next slide, please. So with each set of maps, there's 16 sets of maps there covering different themes. We've accompanied these with key data that have been pulled out of the map from the data behind it. So this is where we can now say that 54% of terrestrial Earth is covered by rangelands, broadly speaking. Accompanied with that, we provide a local case study and some references to the terminology that we're using, etc. I mean, I would like to stress again that these are global data sets. It is a broad mapping that we've provided here. We don't have the detail on the ground, and we've been very reliant on the accuracy of the data sets that we've used. Of course, these data sets are globally recognized data sets, so we're confident, but we have been reliant on the accuracy of them and the categorizations that they've used. And then finally, I mean, the Atlas is work in progress. We have 16 sets of maps here, but it's a living document. We anticipate adding a map every 2 months and to have a discussion around those. We're very open to, if people have access to global data sets and we can map those to the rangelands, then please get in touch. But yeah, watch this space and see this Atlas develop. Next slide, please. Thank you. So finally, I'd just like to draw recognition to the partners that have been involved in this. As I said, we'll be very happy to have more partners involved. This partnership has been very important as we move forward to the launch of the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration this week, in fact. And finally, I'd just like to thank all our supporters, including the mappers, the publishers, web designers, and the communication teams that have been working behind the scenes to allow this Atlas to happen. So that's all from me. Back to Bora.
Thank you. Thank you, Fiona, for the presentation. Very inspiring. Now, we want to hear now from people working on the ground on how they're restoring the land or what challenges they face. So you will hear 3 case studies. So there will be one case study from Tanzania, which will be related to the map on anthropological biomes. There will be one case study from Tunisia, which will relate to the map on ruminant production systems. And there will be one map from outside Africa. It will be a map from a case study from Spain, which is linked to the map on tree cover. So we'll watch the videos, all the videos all together, and I will have my colleagues Martina, Gregorio, and Fernando, who will comment on the different. Martina will be commenting on the introduction of the Tanzania video, Gregorio on the introduction of the Tunisia video, and Fernando on the introduction of the Spain video. So can we have the different videos? Okay. So Martina, maybe let me just introduce you. So Martina is the Global Policy Manager, Food Practice at WWF International. She focuses on conservation, agriculture, and sustainable production at national and international level. And among other issues, she worked on sustainability standards, transparency in supply chains, international commodity markets, and sustainable consumption for a range of projects in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America.
Thank you, Bora. And a warm welcome from my side. And I wanted to mention that for WWF, grassland, rangeland, and savanna protection management and restoration is one of our focal areas. The first case study, as mentioned, we want to present is from Tanzania, where pastoralism and agropastoralism are the predominant livelihood activities. And what you see on the map here is the increase of anthropogenic biomes over the last 300 years, but there is still a focus on the African countries. Next slide, please. And the video will show how land use conflict in rangeland based on legal requirements have been solved through joint village land use planning in an inclusive and participatory approach. Next, the video could now be shown. Thank you.
My name is Birikaru Kutiole Sikilal, a livestock officer in Kiteto District Council, and I'm dealing with rangelands management. And I'm also a focal person for PRM project, Participatory Rangeland Management Project. And historically is that in 2013, the District Council, we were lucky to have a SRMP project funded by donors. So the purpose was to secure the grazing land for pastoralists. And later on, we had a project for PRM that focused on management aspects of the grazing land. So as a district council, we saw the great benefits of the joint land use plans because livestock do not need administrative boundaries. They like much ecological boundaries because grazing resources are not evenly distributed among the villages. You can find one resource is found in village A, but it is not found in village B. So having a joint land use plan gives an opportunity to pastoralists to have sharing of grazing resources. But also, before this project, the grazing land was considered as a land of nobody. So the project brought illegal security of the grazing land. And another benefit is it is easier to develop a grazing land that has been legally secured. Because if the land is not secured and you construct a borehole or you construct a live cattle dip, tomorrow you'll find you have no right to access that facility because the land was not yours. The pastoralists are facing a great challenge of encroachment of the grazing land just because of an increased population. So people are coming into the grazing land aiming to do other activity rather than grazing. So they are facing a great challenge of encroachment. Security of grazing land is not alone, it is not enough. You have secured the land, but you need to improve the grazing land so as to accommodate large number of animals, to make the land produce large biomass on it, to make animals be productive, because when animals are fed enough, they produce more.
The next introduction is from Tunisia.
Yes.
And this will be from Gregorio Velasquez, who is the coordinator of the Pastoralist Knowledge Hub, DFL. Gregorio is an agricultural engineer with 20 years of working experience in livestock production, animal genetic resources, water and food security. So over to you, Gregorio.
Thank you, Laura. Welcome everyone to attending to this side event. And the case study that we are bringing today is related to the map that we are seeing now, which is mapping ruminant production system all around the world into the rangeland. Doesn't mean that pastoralists also need another the use of another different landscapes as forests or cropping farming landscape. But this map is also reflecting how the ruminants are located into the global rangeland. The case study also related to the map is coming up from, next slide please, from Tunis, which is in the North African countries, and conditions are mainly dry into the rangeland, with yearly rain less than 200 millimeters per year. And even within this quite difficult situation, pastoralists make a living on it, and with adapted strategies, and they are even promoting and giving up to 16% of the total agricultural production. So now we will go to the video, please. The video on.
احنا الاغلبيه هنا في الصحراء رحل، فهمت؟ مثلا في عام يبدا عام سمح، مثلا نقولوا ربيع باهي وكل شيء، تلقى الناس الكل تتنقل حسب كل واحد في بلاصه، كل واحد في يتبع الارض، فهمت؟ يتبع الخصوب. وكي تبدا موسم جاف مثلا زي السنه ولا في عام واحد، الاغلبيه تقرب، فهمت؟ باش الاقرب نقطه نتاع توصيل الاعلاف مثلا والماء وكل شيء، فهمتي؟ خاطر قطيع كامل باش ما تنجمش تقاومه في الصحراء، خاصه مع المناخ الجاف شوي، ومع باش تبيع، باش تشري علفه، باش تشري كل شيء، فهمتي؟ لازمك اقرب نقطه باش تقرب للموزعين ومتاعين الاعلاف، مثلا زي اللي عندنا المجمع نتاع الظاهر مثلا ولا وغيرهم، فهمتي؟ احنا نربوا كل واحد وكيفاش، فهمتي؟ مثلا احنا خاص عندنا مثلا 400 راس، مثلا نقولوا 200 غنم مو 200 ماعز، فهمتي؟ تعمل شكون اكثر الحال، اغلب الحالات عندك معك شكون، فهمتي؟ يعاونكم، مثلا هو يسرح معاك وانت تقعد للعلفه مثلا، باش تجيب الماء مثلا، تستحق يد عامله بزايد قد ما تنجم تلقى مضبيك بيد واحد معك شكون اكثر، فهمتي؟ من اكثر المشاكل اللي يعاني منها الفلاح هي نقص العلف، فهمتي؟ والكميات، حتى كي موجود مثلا توجد شيء مثلا 400 راس يعطوك مثلا ساعات 10 شكاير برك، نقص فادح معناه في العلف. من اكثر الحاجه ابار معناه التسويق، وكل فلاح يصمم يخرج سلعته واحده، وكل فلاح مثلا شكون يقبل عليك، فهمتي؟ مثلا حتى زي اليوم في وقت الجاز مثلا في الواحد، حتى الصوف ما عملوش برنامج مثلا نتاع يخرجوا، مثلا يجيبوا لك يعاونوا في حاجات، ثم حاجات تستاهل الدعم، يلزم مثلا يدعموا فيها الفلاح باش يكون، خاصه صغار الفلاحين. تو مثلا خاطر الصحراء كما حكينا من بكري بدت صعبت، فهمتي؟ كل عام تحس اصعب من وقت ما كي تشوف مقارنه بالاسواق الاخرى، مثلا بفلاحين اخرين مثلا مدعومين، بفلاحين مثلا عندهم زايد علفه، عندهم منح مثلا وقروض وكذا، فهمتي؟ هذه من اكثر مشاكل الفلاحه هنا، خاصه الموجودين في الصحراء.
And now, finally, we'll have the video from Spain that will be presented by Fernando Garcia Dori. He's a pastoralist focal point, Rangeland Initiative Coordination Team, Rangeland Initiative. So over to you, Fernando. Fernando?
Can you hear me? Hello, good morning.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Well, thanks a lot for this opportunity to elaborate a little bit about the great work that has been done to put together this atlas, and it's already a tool of great use and value. I will focus on the specific case of the HESA, that is a system, if you can check in the slide, in the map, that extends over the southwest part of the Iberian Peninsula. We're talking about around 4 million, between 3 and 4 million hectares. And the main value is being a very good example of a multifunctional agro-silvopastoral system, which means that we can see here a form of open forest coming from the regional Mediterranean forest, going into as well a combined use of grasslands and forestry uses with evergreen oak trees and the use of the acorns to feed the pigs, the cattle, and the sheep that roam in between this open forest. That is the dehesa. The sheep, for example, use it mostly the flocks as winter pastures, and it's a crucial part of the whole transhumance system for that crosses from north to south in the Iberian Peninsula. The dehesa is one of the best examples of what we would call high nature value farming system, in this case, more livestock system. And it's home to a huge biodiversity, wild biodiversity associated like the Iberian lynx or the black stork or so many other endangered species. What we are able to appreciate through the Atlas tool is the crossing of different data gathered and layers that allow us to appreciate the gain and loss of the vegetal cover, and therefore to be alert to the loss of grasslands because of abandonment and the risk of an abandonment of the pastoralist systems in the region, as well as for example, the different health issues that the trees could face. As an example, in the European Shepherds Network, we use this data to show that it is possible to consider an open forest as a grassland, as a grazing land, and therefore to be subject to subsidies. Because so far, sometimes the European Union Common Agricultural Policy just recognizes like open meadows, so it's much more complex. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy this video also showing practices done in the field.
Dehesa is an agro-silvopastoral system, and it's not 100% natural, it's man-made, but it's a perfect symbiosis of mankind and nature. Agro-silvopastoral means we have agriculture, we have livestock breeding, and we have forestry. The typical livestock here is, it started with sheep about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, probably. And Iberico pigs, which is a special genetic species of pigs. We also call them Blackfoot Pata Negra, and cattle. But here on the farm, we only have indigenous breeds that are perfectly adapted to this landscape and also to the climatic situation, which means it's very hot in summer, dry food only, and little water, probably only once a day. And they can also take the cold temperatures in winter. For the forestry part, it is the most interesting or most special activity we have is cork, because we have mainly two oak trees, cork and holm oak. The holm oak has the advantage that the acorns are sweeter and the Iberico pigs prefer them. But the cork oaks have the advantage that we can use the acorns and also harvest the cork, which is very important, and it still is a very traditional business because it's done without any machines. Apart from what the productive system is, it's very important to realize that the dehesa is what a Portuguese scientist said once: it is the last barrier to the African desert. It's the last ecosystem that is productive, but has almost African temperatures, at least in summer. And the big difference in temperature between day and night, for example, in fall and in springtime. And it's a very very delicate ecosystem. It's a perfect area for different species of animals, hoopoe, vultures, eagles, etc. It is very, very rich in biodiversity. It's one of the richest biodiverse ecosystems in Europe. And it is endangered, of course, because as you can see here with the mountains, if it rains too hard, if you have too much cattle or too many sheep or too many pigs on one place, then the rainfall can just provoke erosion. If you have too less livestock, then the bushes will eat up the dehesa, and then you have a bushfire, and then it's gone. The secret for the success is the balance of the different aspects. So you have to be careful that you have not completely overgrazed parts and other completely abandoned. If you can have some wild parts, which is very good for certain animals or like foxes or whatever. I mean, certain plants, orchids, for example. But you should always manage the land with the different animals, with the different livestock. We use the animals, as a matter of fact, as instruments to improve the countryside. So, of course, we need to have income from it, but we have to, it's more important to use the animals to improve the ecological quality, to avoid erosion, etc., than getting 10 or 20 or 50 more pigs or more calves or whatever.
Thank you. So we have now presented the case study. So you have heard about the diversity of approaches across the globe regarding rangeland practices. And these practices show how rangelands can play an important role in achieving economic, social, and ecological challenges. And as we produce updated versions of the Atlas, we'll continue to share best practices from countries. So I would like to remind you that you can ask questions in the question and answer chat box. So now we are going to look at the questions that you have asked and respond to them. So let me look at what we have here. So that's the question and answer session now that we are starting. So there is one question here. How will the Atlas address the issues of diminishing land for pastoralism? I would like to ask this question to maybe Abdelkader. Would you like to respond to this question?
Can you say again?
The question is, how will the Atlas address the issues of diminishing land for pastoralism?
Yeah, this is very important because I mean the issue of encroachment of land grabbing from pastoralism land to forestry or to agriculture is really due to the lack of this information, lack of support from the decision makers and politicians. So the Atlas is providing this information, it's providing this data, how how rangeland is important, how can it contribute also to the SDGs, but also is placed at the same level as the importance of forestry. So the rangeland is providing this information which will help the decision maker to support pastoralism land from encroachment or from grabbing or from extension of agriculture or forestry. So that is one of the objectives of the rangelands, that providing this information. Indeed, when I made my first presentation, the countries, this is 194 countries during the environmental United Nations Environmental Assembly were saying, okay, but we need data. We know the importance of rangeland. We know the importance of pastoralism in food security, in ecosystem, in climate change, but the data is not there. That we need concrete data which support us to position pastoralism and rangeland in the global agenda, within the restoration agenda that is we are doing now, and the same on the climate change agenda. So that is the objective, that this information will be used by decision makers and politicians to inform and to support rangeland challenges and issues in general, including land wrapping and land encroachment and extension of agriculture or forestry within the rangeland area. Over to you. Maybe my colleague if you want to add things.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. Actually, there's I will let colleagues to add if they want. Actually, there's a question that is related to this first question. How will the big data address some of the linkages between land use needs, livestock, and people population growth? Fiona, would you like to respond to this question and provide any additions to the first one?
I caught the end of that. What was the beginning of it? Sorry.
How will the big data address some of the linkages between land use needs, livestock, and population growth?
Okay. I would suggest that most of those issues are really dealt with at a national level. This atlas, as said, provides global figures, global trends. The next step really is to take this information to national level and to start verifying it at that level. We purposely haven't included country boundaries on this atlas because of the difficulties of ensuring that the data is correct and well spatially correct according to the country boundaries. But yes, I mean, I'd suggest that those kind of decisions are being made at national level. This atlas can provide some guidance of big trends and information that could be brought into those discussions. Yeah, I really think that's all it could do at this stage. Going forward, as I said, we would hope that we will be able to do this kind of information collection, verifying from the bottom up and bringing the information from the top down.
Thank you, Fiona.
May I complete, Bora?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead,
I guess that the atlas should be also completed complementary with another tools applying into the rangeland and pastoralist land. And it could be the life cycle assessment, which is regarding mainly the land change use. So it's just a starting point, this atlas, but it should be completed with applying other tools and methodologies to really complete this bottom-up approach and information gathering. Thank you. Over to you, Bora.
And maybe to add from my side, I think what we have with the Atlas now is a foundation also to work on policy level, because I think what is important really is to integrate this into policy decisions. And very often for policy decision makers, it's important to have some scientific data. And I think we are laying the ground for this with the Atlas, with the maps we have generated, which are maps which ongoing to improve. And we want to bring this really in the global policies of biodiversity, of climate, and of land restoration. Back to you, Bora. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these responses, and indeed we need to improve knowledge information regarding Rangeland to be able to influence policies at an international, national or regional level. There is a question here which relates to, okay, what strategies are people using cost effectively to restoring a full water cycle? This is a question from Benjamin Eliasele. Who would like to respond to this question? Okay, we have our colleague Jonathan Davis. I don't know if you would like to respond to this one. Jonathan is the Global Drylands Coordinator at Iucn.
Thank you, Bora. I wasn't expecting to be put on the spot, but but I saw the question and I found it very interesting. And you can hear me okay, I hope?
Yes.
It's a broad question that perhaps goes a bit beyond this conversation, but I think one of the things that the Atlas can show us is the overlap between some of the major catchments in the world and the rangelands. We did some very crude mapping a couple of years ago that showed that more than a third of the major river systems globally lie at least half, 50% in the rangelands. And so the rangelands, although we think of them as dry, they play a really important role in water management. And the land management itself is tightly connected then to the water cycle. So a lot of the increases we're seeing in the incidence of drought actually probably stems to a large extent from land degradation, so that the land is no longer absorbing and storing water. A lot of water is lost, either back through evaporation or higher levels of runoff, which will then have additional problems around erosion. So it's an important question. I don't think we can really give a convincing, detailed answer in this session, but it is something that we've started working on at Iucn. Maybe by the next GLF, we'll be able to report back on some of that and have a more detailed discussion about this close relationship between, management of land and soil and management of water cycles.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm seeing here a question that I think this is for Fiona. Can you confirm the details of the usage of the data in the Atlas? It would be nice to be able to access the map as raster or shapefile so we can use it in GIS software.
Yeah, so all the data sets that we have used are publicly available on the internet. The sources are given in the PDF file of the Atlas and on the website. We, as ILRI and partners, but ILRI taking the lead here, we got permission to use the data for producing the maps. We can't, and we don't have permission to allow that data as open access. The data would have to be got from the original sources. But the sources are there, so anyone can go and download those data sets from those sources and complying with any permissions that are required and use those data sets for their own purposes.
Thank you, Fiona, for the clarification. Okay, there's an interesting question here which relates to invasive species. The question is, what mechanisms are in place to control invasive species that are threatening the degraded rangeland ecosystem? A question from Victor Otieno. Any insights from Fernando, maybe, or Martina?
Sorry, the question is about the endangered vegetal species on...
Yes, what mechanisms are in place to control invasive species that are threatening the degraded rangeland ecosystem?
Well, it's a great question, and we see it very often. And so far, in my limited knowledge, what I've seen as method to control is complicated. It's very expensive because usually it has to be mechanically and almost manual. And I would say that the best option would be, as much as possible, prevention and rotation of different forms of livestock use of the rangelands. You know, we have seen that in certain areas, when there's like a succession of different species, the possibilities for certain invasive vegetal species to reproduce are a little bit more controlled. So yes, I would say healthy mixed pastoral systems would keep grasslands as well more healthy. It's very symbiotic. If anyone has more information from the botanical side or global scope.
Thank you.
If I could say something again here, Bora.
Yes, go ahead.
Just to sort of tie it back to the Atlas, because, you know, of course, right now this event is focusing on the Atlas. The Atlas is a great new tool. One of the maps shows tree cover in the rangelands, and this is a perennial challenge. Is that how do you monitor healthy rangelands? You can't, in forests, you can look at the density of vegetation and the canopy cover, and it gives you a pretty good idea of the state of the forest. In the rangelands, it's quite misleading. And we've got quite significant areas, I've seen particularly South Asia and in sub-Saharan Africa, where you've got a great increase in tree cover as a result of invasive species. And of course, it then shows up on satellite data sets as a positive trend. There's something improving, when in fact we know it's deteriorating, it's causing a lot of problems. So I think that's one of the things that this Atlas will help us to do now. We can start comparing and contrasting trends in these different layers over time. And then again, I think Fiona mentioned this already, we then need to go down to the country level to explore what's really going on, because at the global level, when you're relying heavily on satellite data, it's much harder to differentiate and to really see what's going on. So I think we have to remember the Atlas is very powerful and it tells a powerful story at a certain level, but we shouldn't exaggerate how useful it can be at local level. At local level, you need more precise information for decision making.
Then a related question here: how can we then better map, you know, invasive trees and shrubs, etc.? That's a question for everybody who's involved in the development of this atlas.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what John said, I think John partly answered this question. But increasingly what we are seeing is improved resolution of satellite imagery and improvements in remote sensing. And for example, the European Space Agency currently is in process of developing a rangeland monitoring system for Africa. The call is actually out at the moment for organizations, companies to apply for this. I'm not sure where we are exactly with the application process, but some of us are involved on the advisory committee for this, etc. But I think this is one of the projects to watch, is this development of Ramona, which is basically a rangeland monitoring system for Africa, because that will hopefully be able to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, what I can add, Bora, also the Atlas contribute towards sustainable management of pastoralism and rangeland with the data that will be provided, that are being provided. And the sustainable rangeland will avoid all the threatening aspect of the rangeland, such as the such as overgrazing, which are one of the causes of introduction of new species, or the extension of pastoralism with the introduction of the new species, or with extension of the agricultural farms. That are the causes of one of the causes of the introduction of the invasive species within the rangeland. So the atlas, with this information providing, will help towards sustainable rangeland management and pastoralism that will contribute to avoid the spread of the invasive species within rangeland areas.
Thank you very much, Abdelkader and Fiona, for the additional responses regarding mapping invasive species. Okay, there's another question here on what are the major problems to shrinking of rangeland area? A question from Ajay Shah. The major problem to shrinking of rangeland area. Martina, would you like to take this question?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think there are various problems. I think there is a problem that we have a problem with probably with climate change. So these areas are getting more and more dry. I think there are problems, and this is not only in Africa, it's also in other countries, that farmers are no longer could live from rangelands and these areas. But I think I would really like to hand over this question to Jonathan to give the perspective, especially from the African countries and the reasons for shrinking in these parts of the world. Jonathan, over to you.
Right, okay. I know that there's been a lot of work, or a lot of effort, certainly from the International Land Coalition, around questions of land rights, land acquisitions, and so on in rangelands. But I know that you come up against a real challenge in the rangelands in many countries, and particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, where there's so much uncertainty over land title. It's very difficult to track how rangelands truly are shrinking or expanding in some cases, mostly shrinking. And it's not only about the rangelands themselves shrinking, but it's actually the access to those lands by pastoralists, which is being eroded. And often that includes some of these areas of the rangelands which are not always thought of as rangelands. And that's one of the things I think the Atlas does quite nicely, uses quite a broad definition. You can't simply say, well, rangelands, it's where you find the grass, because everybody who works with pastoralists know that pastoralists use other areas, adjacent areas, at different times of the year. They'll use forest lands or woodlands in certain seasons, or wetlands or floodplains, river deltas, and so on. And these are often the more contested areas. Often they're seen as high value, very high value to pastoralists, because they often provide this, the difference between surviving or not surviving during key seasons, drought seasons, and so on. And those are the places that are quite often either annexed for protected areas, national parks, or sometimes converted to crop farming. So we still have a lot of uncertainties around that. But again, with this atlas, I think we're starting to shine a light on exactly this challenge. One of the things I think we all want to do next is to break down those big biomes that we mapped into all their many different ecotypes, to get a lot more definition of which areas are considered rangelands within that. And then we can start tracking how that's changing at a global level, but also work with our national partners to see how these different ecotypes are being lost, being converted to other uses. And also, I think one of the big questions which sometimes is overlooked when we look at the encroachment on rangeland, the loss of rangelands, is also the change in ownership and management patterns within the rangelands, even within pastoral societies. Sometimes wealthy individuals end up exerting a lot of control over rangelands to the detriment of larger numbers in the population. And these are really difficult issues to tease out. And again, it requires quite sensitive work at the country level, but that's obviously where we want eventually to get with this kind of mapping work, with much more detailed national level analysis.
And Bora, maybe also to add, if you look outside African countries, there is a lot of problems on land conversion. So if you look at the Great Plains in the US, there is a conversion for cropland. So we are also losing this rangeland, these grasslands and savanna and shrublands for crop production, for large scale crop production. So that's also something to consider. Especially as these areas have a high value on biodiversity, but also as a sequestration of carbon on the ground. So these are all the problems we want to raise with this atlas and to bring in the focus and to open the discussion also on this really, as we called it, neglected ecosystems. Thank you. Back to you.
Bora,
Thank you. Yes, Abdelkader.
No, this is Gregorio, Bora.
Oh, sorry, Gregorio.
Don't worry. I would like to complete a little bit on the top of what was already said by Jonathan and Martina, because I consider that the shrinking of the rangeland is mainly because of change of use, but also disruption of livestock mobility. We know that the pastoralists move around looking for scarce resources around. And I think disruption of mobility of livestock because construction of infrastructure or because of a change of land use is causing shrinking and the deterioration of the rangeland around, because pastoralists, they have more access to those resources and to those areas. And also it's quite related to the access to water. Pastoralists need water when moving around and into the dryland, where we're seeing that they are up to 78% of the rangeland. Water is a key element for pastoralists, and if the water is captured for other different uses of the land, like irrigation project or urban use of the water, pastoralists will not even be able anymore to go to those areas. Thank you. Over to you, Bora.
Thank you, Gregorio, and thanks to all of you. I think I will take one more question because we have to close soon, and maybe one comment. There's a question here about how can we utilize cactus farming as a resilient food crop for humans and animals in drylands. I want to ask this question to Abdelkader, and maybe Jonathan, if you can complete, it would be great. So cactus farming as a resilient food crop for humans and animals in drylands, any idea?
Not really. I know that there is pastoralists are using cactus on pastoralist areas, especially on dividing the areas for rotations, and also using the cactus as fodder for animals. But maybe our colleague who is more practical in the field, Fernando, can have some example more concrete from Spain on this, if they are using such practice, and complete.
Fernando?
Yes, well, I'm afraid I cannot complete that much because I'm not. I don't know cases of use of cactus, and I was thinking on that they're used not only for farming but as livestock fodder, and I think it's something I would like to research about, because it's true that the south of Spain will be growing into the arid climatic region. But yeah, I don't know of any case I can share about it.
That's
Bora,
okay.
Bora, you just need to refer to one publication produced by FAO about this use of cactus for resilience and how to grow. It's specific through the pear cactus, but it could be a good start to consider cactus as one of the crop helping and improving resilience of the pastoralists, but also rural population in drylands. Thank you.
Okay, is it the link that's or
Yeah,
can you put the link in the chat box? That would be great, so that everyone has access to the publication.
Yeah, I put the
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, maybe a last comment. That's about the global database that was developed by WORCAT. So in order to get experience on the ground, Sustainable Rangeland Management compiled a standardized format in the WORCAT global database. These practices are geo-referenced and give a lot of information on the ground in the land management practices and the impact that they have. So should this be included in the atlas? I would like to ask this question to Fiona.
Yeah, I saw that that question. Thank you, Hans-Peter. As we said, I mean, this atlas is very much focusing on global data, global trends. But we have tried to provide space for local voices to come up in terms of the case studies that are connected to the maps. So I think firstly, from a global perspective, we're not in a position at the moment to really understand what is the best way forward to move from global to national. We don't have the resources to do that either. So this is a discussion that we will have going forward, and including in the WWF led platform on grasslands and savannas. There's a technical working group there on mapping and data, and this will be one of the forums where we will discuss that. And Hans-Peter, I think you're a member of that. So it's something to be discussed. From a local perspective, with our case studies, we provided a taster of the issues that are related to specific maps. I think if there are case studies that are in the WOCAT SLM guide that are clearly linked to a particular map, then we can consider writing a case study and doing an interview similar to the films that you've seen here. We expect to continue adding case studies, adding films. So there's space there to do that. So I think the short answer is to be discussed and work out the best way forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fiona, for the clarification. So I think I will close now the question and answer session. And thank you very much to all the speakers for answering the questions from the audience. We are now close to the end of this session, and I would like to invite now Jonathan Davis to close this session. And yeah, as I said earlier, Jonathan Davis is the Global Drylands Initiative Coordinator, and he's also Senior Agriculture Advisor at the Iucn. So Jonathan, you have the floor now for the closure of this very interesting session. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Bora, and thank you to all my colleagues here for your excellent interventions and also for the excellent long-term work and partnership that is behind this, the Atlas and the wider initiative that the Atlas has really emerged from. I'm really excited about the Atlas. I really do see it as a game changer because we've been looking for this kind of global data for so long. You've probably all heard the saying, I don't know who said this first, but you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Well, to be fair, pastoralists have been managing the rangelands very well for many centuries, often, well, no doubt, using their own measures, their own definitions. But I think governments and other actors have generally been less effective. And part of the challenge that they face is is agreeing on what we're talking about. So I think the Atlas is really a first step towards getting more definition on rangelands globally and in countries, and then strengthening public support for sustainable rangeland management or restoration where rangelands are degraded. But just a quick reflection on the question about cactuses, because questions like that come up often, you know, possible solutions that no doubt will work somewhere, may not work elsewhere. I think we all need to understand the rangeland system and the pastoral system, particularly it's a social economic system, if we want to understand how to work with pastoralists to introduce improvements. Globally, we have major knowledge gaps. Look at the slide that Abdul Qadir presented with that massive dots of research, with these tiny fraction of them that actually include any research on rangelands or pastoralism. We're still dealing with a major knowledge gap. And so people are looking for solutions, but we're in the early stages of taking a kind of trial and error approach. Right? And sometimes the errors can be quite serious. Think of some of the alien invasive species that were referred to a little bit earlier. These come from the trial and error approach, and sometimes the consequences of the error have been pretty serious. So we really have to make a call to action to really start doing the right thing. We need to invest heavily in understanding when do different solutions work, when are they appropriate and when are they not. I also think this atlas is an important step for getting attention, much more attention, to rangelands in the international sphere, in international agreements and actions. Some of my colleagues have already mentioned this. And this is a big year to talk about as a super year. We've got the launch of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We've got the UN Food Systems Summit in, I believe, October. We've got the Convention on Biological Diversity, revising its 15-year program for the next period of time with new targets. We've got a much stronger argument now to say, look, 54% of all terrestrial ecosystems are rangeland. They're underprotected. They're underrepresented in action, for example, under land degradation neutrality targets, right, which is one of the Sustainable Development Goals. And some countries are doing good things, and some partners are doing great work on the ground, but we really need an urgent acceleration to increase action on the ground. And we can do that by getting more attention through this decade, this UN Decade on Ecosystems, and particularly the International Year on Rangelands and Pastoralists, which will be in 2026. The UN motion has already been passed. We really should advocate for more nuance under the Convention on Biological Diversity, get a more balanced attention to the different ecosystems. Forests get great attention, perhaps not enough, but certainly more than others. And we need a more balance to ensure that other biomes are also conserved and sustainably managed. Several countries that are parties to the UN Convention to combat desertification have this year called for action on rangeland restoration under the convention. There was a call at the recent CRIC that was held in March, and that will be taken forward to the next negotiations, which will be in 2022. And we'll work with all the partners on this event to keep raising rangelands as an important part of the global food system, and they need to be reflected in this UN Food Systems Summit and whatever work emerges from that, particularly to address the high biodiversity benefits that can come from these systems, which are essentially livestock systems, because that's a counterbalance to the usual narrative around livestock being more seen as an environmental threat. Here, they're a great environmental opportunity. And of course, the climate negotiations. There's going to be a huge conference at the end of the year, and we need to get more attention to the role of rangelands, both in mitigation and in adaptation. And finally, we're all still languishing in this COVID period, but there will be a light at the end of the tunnel, and there will be a post-COVID recovery. And we've seen clearly rural areas in developing countries have been among the hardest hit economically. So we need to make sure that urgent attention is provided to reboot rangeland development, but also to take advantage of the opportunity that will create for promoting a green recovery. And in fact, I think what we've heard today and what we know from elsewhere is that green recovery isn't an alternative. Rangeland development is inherently green. Pastoralism is inherently green. And so we need to rethink rangeland policies and investments in order to capitalize on this sustainability potential. So once again, let me thank all of the partners on this call, and on their behalf, thank the organizers of the Global Landscape Forum for this session. I'd like to thank all the participants. We have between 150 to 200 participants, I think, right now. And I really look forward to hearing from you afterwards, any feedback, and hopefully you'll see this as a great opportunity to expand the partnership around rangeland restoration globally. Thank you. Back to you, Bora.
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone, and yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for inspiring key messages, and yeah, goodbye.
Hi everyone, this is Mordecai Ogada. I'm a Kenyan wildlife ecologist and a conservation policy expert, and a speaker at this year's GLF conference on restoration of Africa's drylands. This conference is very timely, of course, as we all know, and the restoration of Africa's drylands is a very crucial topic at this time. One of the things that we all have to keep an eye on is that restoration is a very powerful word. It implies what happens after some kind of disaster. But we have to ask ourselves, what are we restoring it from, and what are we restoring it to? Africa's drylands are crucial for biodiversity, human livelihoods, ecosystem services, etc., etc. And most of all, and most importantly, we must inform the global audience and keep them informed of the fact that Africa's drylands are also home to millions of African people. The fact that they're this important for biodiversity implies an equilibrium that has existed there for tens of thousands of years at least in several parts of Africa. So this must have been something going right. And I think restoration has to look closely at strengthening and restoring that wherever it has been lost. However, a lot of conservation practitioners see restoration in the light of fortress conservation, as in the removal of existing humans and human livelihoods from areas for the sake of biodiversity. This is a fallacy and something that grew out of the creation of national parks in the United States in the 19th century, which cannot be applied all over the world and cannot be applied in this time and place where we exist today. We have to look carefully at decisions like the recommendations on having 30% of the world under protected areas. We have to ask where people live, and you imply protection. What is that protection from? In many parts of Africa, this manifests on the ground as protection of areas from its residents or its custodians or its owners. And this necessitates violence, necessitates displacement, and all sorts of violations of human rights that are unacceptable in the world as we know it today. So conservation must take into account all these things and must be practiced at much higher resolution. We must remove from conservation the primitive notion that something that worked in the United States can work in Africa, and something that works in Africa can be applied in Asia, etc., etc., etc. We as experts and practitioners have to take our place at the table, and we have to be honest with governments, with international organizations, with donors, and all the people involved to make sure that what we are putting in place is not only environmentally sustainable, but politically, humanly, and socially sustainable, so that we maintain equilibrium, because equilibrium is what lasts for millennia. Fortresses only last for very short periods of time. So I look forward to discussing these things further, and I look forward to a decade that will show the way and show a departure from what we've been doing in the past that has required so much violence, that has required so much in terms of financial input, and that has created crises in many parts of our world. but we need to do this for the good of everybody. The protection of biodiversity is not for its own sake. It's never for its own sake. It's for the good of everybody. And I look forward to talking to all the participants more about this. Thank you.